So now I'm excited to introduce our featured program. We have heard so much in the news about canceled conventions and empty hotel rooms during COVID. And as we also know, Atlanta's convention and tourism business is one of our top economic drivers. So I know we're all excited and interested to hear about that accelerated return and what that path forward looks like. I'm honored to introduce our co-chair of programs, David Rubinger, who's going to lead our discussion. David is the market leader and publisher of the Atlanta Business Chronicle, which is one of the leading business publications in the country. David is a seasoned communications professional, always asks fantastic questions, and I know has a particular keen interest in this topic. So David, I will turn it over to you and look forward to hearing some of those great questions that I know that you ask.
Thank you, President Catherine. And people don't realize the first edition of Atlanta Business Chronicle back in 1978, the whole cover was on the convention, the sprouting convention business of Atlanta. So when the pandemic hit and all these things happened, there's no person better in the world to sort of discuss and figure out how we're going to work through these issues than William Pate. William Pate's the president and CEO of the Atlanta Convention and Visitors Bureau, and he is our guest today. If you can bring William up, William, it is great to see you.
Great to see you, buddy.
And I'm really glad you're with us because I know you've been traveling and now you're back and you're going to be traveling again. So you are the perfect person to talk about not only what's going on, but you're enough of a seasoned traveler that you can also give everyone good tips.
Yes, indeed. Happy to do that as well. Just happy to be available to talk about some good news for the first time in a year and a half.
And also, we probably want to take Sagar under our wing. It sounds like that I don't know if when you were 21, if you, I know I hadn't traveled like that when I was 21 years old. It sounds like he's had a pretty good run of seeing the world and someone we're all going to want to meet. William, before we get started, I'm sure virtually everyone in Rotary either knows you, knows of you, knows a little bit about you, certainly knows about Atlanta Convention and Visitors Bureau. But I love your personal journey that brought you to this. I love the fact that you're a journalism major from Georgia State. But tell me about the path that got you to, you took over for Spurgeon Richardson many years ago, but the things that sort of led you, that the building blocks that got you to be in the role you're in now.
Well, I was doing marketing and advertising for MCI, the telecom company back in the 90s. If you remember the telecom wars, those of you who are old enough to remember those. MCI was bought and all those guys went to prison, but luckily I went to Bell South before all that happened. So I was at Bell South for 13 years as the chief marketing officer. And then of course, Bell South was purchased by AT&T and they wanted me to move to Texas, and I'm an Atlanta boy through and through. So we stayed here. And at that point, Spurge was looking to retirement, and the board contacted me and asked me if I would be interested. This was 2008 when everything had, fallen apart. I had chaired the board of the ACVB 10 days before 9/11. So I was used to business falling off the cliff, and we put some good things in place right after 9/11 that allowed Atlanta to come back very strong once travel started again. And so I started in 2008 in this job, and it's just been a fantastic journey. Although I will say my timing hasn't been very good being in this industry. I always seem to come in right when everything's falling apart. But it's been a great journey for somebody who, has grown up in Atlanta. It's a great opportunity to talk about the city. I'm very proud to be here. And it's great to have people come here. I love when people come to our city. It's a great opportunity to show it off and show all the great things that Sagar's going to find out when he gets here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So let's hop into our presentation here, because you've been giving this speech around to both people in Atlanta and around the country about how things are going on, and it's really fascinating some of the metrics that you've been able to isolate. So let's talk about get the broad overview of some various economic indicators you've seen. And Jens, if you could pull up that first slide, and I'll let William talk to the things that are going on that he's seeing right now.
Okay. you want to hit, there we go. This information comes from Tourism Economics, which is one of the major economic information providers in our industry, and they track travel all over the world. And what this really shows is year over year, from 2019 to 2020, the amount of drop off that we had in different sectors. So you can see, for instance, air travel in May of 2020 was down 90%. Of course, overseas travel, as you know, has been struggling. And then as you move through the year and we get through 2020, we begin to see some recovery in the beginning of 21 as people are getting vaccinated. You see now that auto trips are actually outpacing 2019. Short-term rental demand is outpacing 2019. And we're slowly closing the gap on air travel and hotel demand. Now, overseas travel is going to continue to lag, especially with the potential of this Delta variant being disruptive in the next couple of months. So it's still going to be a year or so before international travel comes back. But the good news is we are definitely seeing things move in the right direction. If we want to,
go ahead.
I was going to call for the next slide, but
yeah.
So just to say, air passenger volume, which is now 70 in June, is 71% of the 2019 level. If you've been traveling, you know the planes are full, and you're going to see airlines begin to start to add routes back. But in terms of the planes that they have that are flying right now, you've definitely seen leisure travel come back over the summer. And as we're going to see in I think the next slide or two, business travel will hopefully follow that very quickly.
Well, let's take a pause here for a second, because one of the questions we asked on the Mentimeter was how are Rotarians feeling about taking commercial air flights, and how many have you been on in the last 3 months? So let's see whether we're in sync with the country, ahead of the country, behind the country. So let's see what the results are. So our group has not been flying, William.
I know people have to get out. 90% of people in the country who were polled said they're going to have a trip before the end of the year. So everybody's got to get comfortable getting out, got to get out of the basement and onto the beach.
There you go. So let's go back. If we can go back to Jens, if we can go back to the slideshow for a second. It's getting better. And clearly I think people are planning more. I know you're traveling next week. I'm traveling. I'm actually going out of the country next week, which is kind of daunting. But there are certain parts of the world where you can go where they really have come up with a COVID policy that you can feel comfortable going with. So we'll see how things go. But let's talk about the business travel piece. Why do you think the reason is for the lag at this point? What do you think are the factors that are going on?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the bringing people back to work in general.
Right.
Downtown, I was told the other day about 35% of the downtown buildings are occupied. So about a third of people are back to work. I think that's going to continue to grow. We're bringing our staff back August 16th when school goes back into session. And I think by the time we get to Labor Day, we're going to see many people back in their office. And so business travel is going to, catch up with that. I think as companies get into the third and fourth quarter, looking for year-end results, are going to have their salespeople out. And of course, that's going to benefit Atlanta because we're such a strong business travel city.
Right. Let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, here you see business. About a third of businesses are traveling right now. And if we go to the next slide, you can see the number of companies that are planning to travel in the next 3 months. So as we get into third quarter, and when you put those together, which is, I think, the next slide, you're going to see that about 80% of business travel will begin coming back as we get here to the end of the year. So
the most important piece of this, or the piece that you've identified as being one of the most important things, is the role the vaccine plays in this return to normalcy. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think, as I was talking to reporters back last summer, our hotels were doing state-of-the-art cleaning. The Georgia World Congress Center was the first, received the first bio-risk certification from GBAC. So it was safe to come into our facilities. And we had, of course, the distancing policies and everything. So in general, it was very safe to travel. The issue was trust in travel, and people were just afraid. They were just afraid to travel. And the thing that was going to change that was going to be the vaccine. And I think we've seen that. I mean, as soon as the vaccine came out and that began to be, the take rates, took into large numbers, people got comfortable getting back out. And I think you've seen that. And we've seen that with leisure travel. I mean, leisure travel has come back even more quickly than we expected. And that will, again, lead to, pickup in business travel, and is going to lead to pickup in our convention business.
If you could pull up that next slide about the vaccine. It had an interesting take as to what you're seeing. Oh, I'm sorry. I think it was a slide. There we go.
And what this basically shows, and something that many of us have seen, is that vaccine rates are correlated with education. And most of our convention business is with professional associations. And so they tend to be more educated attendees. And so the people who are going to be coming to the city in general are going to be vaccinated. That gives the city a comfort. It also gives a comfort to the attendees that they're going to be traveling with people and meeting with people who've already been vaccinated. And as we get here to the back half of the year, we're going to see our convention business pick up significantly from about one convention a month from the beginning of the year to a convention every 7 to 10 days through the end of the year.
And Jens, if we can go to a poll, I think we did a poll question asking, we could look at this one as well. Could you, Jens, is it possible to go to the next one before? Well, okay, we'll have to scroll through it. We're getting a preview of how, there we go. Thank you. We asked all of y'all whether or not you've been vaccinated, and you had a choice of saying yes, no, or it's none of your business. Let's see how that turned out.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So
it's really great, and I think correlates very closely with what we just talked about in terms of education and how that aligns with vaccinations. And that is something our club should be very, very proud of. Very
true. So looking now to the Atlanta piece, and by the way, I appreciate everyone answering that survey question. I know that we thought about that long and hard about whether that would be uncomfortable, but since this was totally anonymous, it was just a good way for us to take a poll. By the way, while we're talking, I just want to remind everyone, please put questions into the chat box on your screen, and they'll flow to us so we can be answering your questions when we get to the Q&A piece. Nothing worse than getting to the end of a session and ask for questions and there are crickets. So if you have questions, start populating them now. Bill Hennigan's going to send them along to me, and we'll be able to answer them as they come in. So appreciate your participation, because I'm sure you'll have some questions for William as we go forward. William, let's take it from this sort of national global perspective to Atlanta. I think people tend to underappreciate just what a huge economic engine our convention and visitors business is to our city. Because it's not things we necessarily are consumers of. We're off doing our own thing, yet there are all these people coming in to flush our economy with so many great things, whether it's the sporting venues, whether it's the conventions with the marts, all over town, and it impacts the entire state. Tell us about what we saw beforehand.
Sure.
And
I think we have
that slide.
Yep. So in 2019, which was really the best year in the history of the city, we saw 57 million visitors. What people may not realize about Atlanta is that domestic travelers traveling in the United States to domestic destinations, we're number 4 in the country. So people love to come to our city. It's very accessible. Obviously, we have great things to see and do when you're in. We have great weather. So 57 million visitors in 2019. That represents $16 billion in visitor spending in downtown, Midtown, and Buckhead. And more importantly, it supports about 300,000 jobs. And many of the folks on this Zoom call, you probably had your first job in the hospitality industry. I mean, that's how many of us in high school and college, begin to learn about being in the workforce. And so these jobs are very important, and they grow with the business, because when you bring an extra million people to your city, you've got to hire people to provide them the level of service that they expect. Now, unfortunately, conversely, when your business contracts significantly, as ours did in 2020, a lot of those jobs are at risk, and we saw a lot of those jobs lost last year.
If we could go to the next slide and see where things are.
So this is just give you a little dynamic of what we've seen in our business. In the last 16 months, we've lost 420 events, more than 1.4 million room nights in downtown, midtown, and Buckhead. Probably more importantly, revenue is down about 65%. So if you apply that to a $16 billion industry, it's about a $10 billion impact overall. And of course, with that, a significant number of job losses across hotels, restaurants, all of our venues. I think it's also important to understand that, concerts and festivals and sporting events are big demand generators for Atlanta because of where we're situated in the Southeast. A lot of people drive into Atlanta for a major concert or a major festival or one of our great sporting events. And so, most of that business was lost as well. And so that's the reason why we saw business just go down so quickly. To give you just an example, in February of 2020, average daily occupancy downtown, midtown, and Buckhead was 80%. 80% of the hotel rooms occupied every day. By April, that was 9%. So not only was it an extreme loss, it was very, very quick. And now by the end of last year, we had built up to about 36%. Now our hotel occupancy is about 53%. So we're heading in the right direction, but we still have a long way to go.
It's a good moment to check the Mentimeter to see when you're talking about attending various things, concerts, all that. We asked all of y'all the question about whether or not you've been to restaurants, been to venues, been to concerts. Jens, let's pull that up and see what people did in July. So that's pretty good. I mean, people are getting out.
Well, I think you're really seeing the pent-up demand really unleashed. And again, it's people getting to restaurants, concerts. Of course, our sporting events now are at 100% capacity. And as we talked about, leisure travel as well. People have just been ready to get out. We've been in the basement long enough. And that, I think, is going to continue to take us forward. That's going to translate, I believe, into our convention business. We're going to see significant pickup over the next 6 months in our convention business. And, the big question, of course, is about this Delta variant. And obviously, we're all very concerned about that across all of our businesses.
Right.
And, hopefully we'll be able to weather that over the fall.
So the tough question I have is, if a lot of our businesses were impacted, obviously, last year. Your business was impacted. My business was impacted. I'm glad I didn't own a hotel. I mean, so the question I have is, in talking to the hotel owners and to the major flags that are in our city, how do you think they were able to survive through this? And how do you see them coming out on the back end that we're not going to have major turnover in the whole hotel industry? What has been the sentiment, and what did they do to sort of protect themselves from this?
Well, I think one of the things you need to realize is in 2020, we had 28 hotels suspend operations in the city. You think about that for a moment, suspending operations completely for several months. Again, I think really begins to help you understand the scale at which this really affected our industry. Now, all of our hotels were back operating again by the fall, and are all doing, are all marching back and coming back now as our business continues to grow. I think what they did is what good operators do, right? They took care of the expense line very quickly. We did have some comeback in leisure as people were getting checks from the government. Many of them were taking those checks and coming to hotels and spending, getting a weekend out of the house. And that certainly provided some assistance as we moved on. On the restaurant side, of course, we had takeout, was a huge benefit to our restaurateurs and saved so many of them. And, we were encouraging people to buy gift cards or do takeout to help restaurants get through. But now I think we're at the turn. And not only is business coming back, but business is going to continue to accelerate now through the end of the year. I think by the time we get to 2022, we're going to get back to some sense of normalcy. And we believe by 23, we're going to be back to 2019 levels across the board.
Well, that's a good reason to pop back to the slides. I believe, so, you're looking at the return. I guess we just can't be in too big of a rush. We just have to know that you just can't turn the spigot on and have it all be back where it was yesterday.
Well, unfortunately, I mean, as we talked about earlier, only 70% of people have been vaccinated. And we really need to get that number higher, because that does put some pressure on people to travel. But we have seen leisure travel pick up, and we've really seen it pick up here in Atlanta. And a lot of that is because so many people here are from somewhere else. And so their friends have come to visit. People have been wanting to reconnect. Again, we expect business travel to come back here as we get into the fall. Atlanta is going to be a huge beneficiary of that because of the great business presence that we have here in the city, both domestically as well as internationally. And our convention business, 75% of our convention business is going to occur in the back half of the year. So companies that wanted, and associations that wanted to have their conventions earlier this year, we were able to move back to the back half of the year in the hopes that they would be able to move forward. This is a great opportunity in Georgia because we stayed open.
Right.
And so we're ahead of California and New York and some of our other competitors who were slower to open. In fact, we took some convention business from some of our competitors because they weren't sure they were going to be able to hold their convention if they stayed in some of those other cities. But they knew that we were open, and so they brought their business here to Atlanta. So we've been a beneficiary of that. All of that is going to help. Of course, concerts are coming back. Festivals are back, and we've got a great sports portfolio for the back half of the year.
Good question from the audience that just came in. Will we begin to see vax requirements for attending conferences? Is that becoming the norm, or is it going to be on a case by case, or what do you see happening there?
I think it's going to be on a case by case. In general, it seems that companies and organizations are reluctant to require a vaccination. However, they do want to know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't been vaccinated, so they can get a sense of how to manage their crowd. So I'm not sure it'll end up being a requirement. I do think as you look at international travel, I do think you're going to see vaccination requirements as we get back to some level of international travel, particularly to stop quarantining. And so I think that'll be a major deterrent. But in terms of our conventions, most of them, as I said, are the predominant number of attendees are going to be vaccinated. They'll handle that on a case-by-case basis, but I don't think it's going to be a huge impediment to people coming to the city.
Let's go back to the slides. I think we were just about, I don't know if we were about through with what you had. Here are some things that you have going on, that you've had going on.
Yeah. So when we started the year, and people are very familiar with a lot of these big events that we have in the city. And again, because Georgia was open, we were able to bring our convention business back a little more quickly than other parts of the country. But instead of a convention every week, we're having about one convention a month. And the attendance at those conventions was about 30% of what a typical event would be. Now as I said, we've got 20 conventions in the back half of the year. It's about one every 7 to 10 days. The big question mark is how quickly attendance is going to come back. I will say that we're feeling better about attendance, and hopefully we're going to be in the 70% range of typical attendance for some of these events. And that is going to be a huge boost to our hotels, to our restaurants, to our events, even to the small businesses that support our industry and take care of visitors when they come to the city.
How are we doing compared to other cities of our typical competitor is Vegas, Chicago, Orlando, all your normal competitors. How are we faring versus how they're doing?
Well, Vegas opened about the same time we did. And I would say that our business is on par with where Las Vegas is. In terms of Chicago, Anaheim, San Francisco, again, we've been open longer than they've been. And so we've got a little bit of a head start. Most of them, and I was with many of my peers this past week talking about this, many of them are looking to start their convention business after Labor Day. Orlando, their convention business is going to probably pick up right around Labor Day. They've been a big beneficiary of leisure travel, as you can imagine, as Disney opened up their parks. You've seen the crowds in there, and so of course that's been a big help to Orlando, and they'll be on par with us in convention business, very quickly.
We now have some issues hanging. First of all, I think, are we about done with the slides? I'm trying to think if there was you pull the slides back up.
Yeah,
you had a few more data points I thought were sort of interesting for our crew.
Yeah, this is just a forward-looking, which is why we're very positive about this return, because to put this in perspective, these are the top bar is the largest conventions that come here. We had 6 in 2020. So we've doubled that in 2021. And as we get back to 2022 next year, we'll get our normal number of very large conventions. And these are conventions that'll last 7 to 10 days. And you start to see that, we've set up very nicely for the future. So it's all about the pivot and getting people back. And once we get people back, our business is going to rebound very quickly. The chart at the bottom is for medium-sized conventions and larger, the number of room nights that they take in the city. When we get to 1 million or 925,000 room nights, the city really, really does well financially. And for the last 5 years, we've hit that number or beat it. And of course, when we hit 2020, that dropped drastically. We're about 60% back here in 21. And as we get to 22 and beyond, that number will continue to grow and fill in as we begin to get attendance, expected attendance numbers for our conventions moving forward. So the future looks very good. We just got to get through this last pivot here and kind of get our ground under us. And then I think we're going to really see a very good rebound here in the city.
So I don't want to be the gray cloud, but we got to keep on talking about these issues that we got to overcome at this pivot point. And it's actually a perfect time for us to bring up the last Mentimeter question that we had, which was a question that was a broad question that was asked of everyone as to their sentiment about what concerns them the most right now. So what level of concern do you have over the last 6 months of the various topics? Let's see how it came out. So it appears as though the Delta variant is obviously everyone's primary concern, but not that far behind are both the availability of labor and the supply chain issues, which I think that's pretty much on par. Probably the Delta variant is because it's such a great unknown. We just don't know how we're all going to be able to react to it. The other two, we've been living with that for a little while, and it's very tricky, and especially for the convention. Your industry, the availability of labor has a huge stranglehold on the ability to come back strong.
Well, momentum is such a big part of our market, and the Delta variant is really the thing that could really stop our momentum. Currently, most of the folks who are getting that variant are unvaccinated, so hopefully that will help drive up vaccination levels. But as you're seeing that in the news every day, it just will begin to give people some pause if we see that spike, over the next 8 weeks. And just as our business is really gaining a good foothold to have that, and if it impacts our attendance, would be very disappointing, because, as I said, we feel like we're in a very good position. The challenge with labor, hospitality, again, you talk about a double whammy. First off, the business gets hammered. Then just as we're getting ready to come back and restaurants are ready to be filled and hotels are ready to be filled, now they can't get enough workers to provide the level of service that people are accustomed to. And so what I would, just remind people, particularly in restaurants, as you go into restaurants, understand that most of the time they're short-staffed. And so try to have a little bit more patience. It's going to take a while to get back to the service levels that we've all been accustomed to in our business. But hopefully we're doing some programs at the ACVB, working with the hospitality industry to encourage more people to get into our industry. Hopefully as we get through the fall, and if we continue to get some good news on vaccination rates, hopefully we'll see people returning back to our industry, which is very much a face-to-face industry. And so hopefully we'll be able to close the gap on that, and that'll provide the financial strength that we need here through the end of the year for all of our companies.
The state ending their payments to unemployed folks, have you seen the impact of that yet? Has that helped, or is it too soon to tell at this point about how it's impacted hiring levels?
Well, I know in the last data report, nationally it showed that Georgia did have some lift in employment, which some folks were correlating with the fact that we had stopped those payments. That's one data point. I think we need to see several more. But it's logical to assume that, particularly among hourly employees, that as that has been taken away, there's more of an incentive for them to come back to work.
I'm sure our competitors love to pick on Atlanta because of we've unfortunately made some headlines around the issues of public safety. Obviously, it's something you have to always have constant talking points available to you for anybody you talk to. What are your talking points around public safety right now? What are the ways for us to address it? I talk about it with my own friends and family outside of Atlanta, trying to explain that it's not as bad as the media makes it out to be necessarily, that we've had our issues, but when you live in an urban environment, you're going to have crime issues, and they sprout up. How have you been trying to measure it, and what can we do as an organization to help with that messaging?
Well, I think specifically it is true. This is an issue across the country. And so, particularly we were talking to convention customers, it's not like they're going to be able to go to a competitive city that's not seeing an increase in crime. In downtown, Midtown, and Buckhead, we have some luxury in that when we have conventions in town, we know where the flow is to the Congress Center. So they come down Peachtree Street, they go down Andrew Young, they cross the park, they go in the convention center. And so we've for years been working very close with the Atlanta Police Department. When big conventions are in town, we can tell them when they come in, we can tell them when they go out, we can kind of tell them their traffic patterns, so they're able to beef up security around those travel corridors. And that's worked very well for us. And I just take you back to, if you remember, the 2013 Final Four, and we had 100,000 people downtown every night for 3 nights, and really no incidents to speak of. And again, that's because of the great partnership we have with the police force, that we're able to manage large crowds when they're in town. And of course, we've got the VIC and all the cameras, so they're able to keep an eye on what's going on. The reality about downtown is there just haven't been a lot of people downtown. I've been coming downtown throughout the pandemic, and there certainly have been days where literally I was the only person on Peachtree Street downtown. So, so crime in and of itself in the tourism corridor has not been an issue. But crime in general is an issue, and something that we've constantly got to be on point about, because sometimes I feel like Atlanta gets held to a different standard on crime when you look at it across the country. And so it's very important for us to be on top of it. We're constantly on top of it when we bring convention meeting planners into the city to talk about bringing their business here. We always have them meet with the police department to talk about public safety, and really create a level of comfort that when they come here, we're going to take care of our visitors.
And one of the questions we got was, how has the rise in crime affected the tourism business? My guess is it's really hard to measure right now, because how do you know, are tourists not coming because of their concerns over COVID or over crime? There's no real good way to measure those impacts at this point, because we don't have a level playing field.
Yeah, I can tell you, among our convention customers, COVID is the thing they're concerned about. Mm-hmm. And helping them understand all of the procedures we have in place to keep our visitors safe and our employees safe, the ones who are serving our visitors. And so that's where a lot of the conversation is. And obviously we continue to cover security, because security is always important. But I would say in general that COVID still is top of mind for people traveling anywhere.
Let's switch over to sports for a second. I like talking about fun stuff. Let's talk about sports. Let's get off this the dark things. I mean, really, sports have come back stronger than I expected them to tell you the truth. I was very pleased. I said within the Business Chronicle framework, I said when sports venues go to 100%, that's when we can go back to having in-person events, because clearly, and that's what Rotary is doing, coming back next week, being live. I think we've gotten to this degree where we've gotten comfortable with being in person. Two things. One is, what is the state of sports entertainment in Atlanta right now? Are you happy with it? Second is a question from the audience. It's a great question. When will we get a Final Four and an All-Star game back to our city after having lost them?
Okay, let me take those in pieces. So first off, we have a great sports portfolio for the back half of the year, where we've got our tennis challenge coming up. We've got the Tour Championship that'll be coming up here in a few weeks, and then we get into football season. And one of the really exciting things is that people might not have caught up to is the MEAC SWAC Challenge, which is two HBCU conferences. They're going to be kicking off the football season and on August 28th. And we're going to have ESPN's First Take as well as College Game Day down at Georgia State to kick off the football season. So that's going to be a great way to get people back into the groove for football. And of course, we've got two Chick-fil-A kickoff games over Labor Day that are going to bring tens of thousands of folks into the city. We've got the SEC Championship, which will be back, and we'll be back with 100% attendance. So it'll be great to have that back. The Cricket Celebration Bowl, which is the HBCU National Championship, is the week before Christmas. And then we close out with the Chick-fil-A Bowl just before New Year's Day. The great thing about sporting events is they tend to happen on weekends and during holidays when business people aren't traveling. So they're almost always incremental to our business plan. So being able to have them 100% at 100% capacity is going to give a really good incremental lift to our business as we get through the fall.
So back to the other question, though. We had two major events that were supposed to have happened here. One didn't happen because of COVID. The other didn't happen because, well, frankly, because of politics. So I know that Dan Corso, the folks at the Atlanta Sports Council, you, the governor, there are a lot of folks who are going to bat for us, whether it's for those two things. And of course, we still have the World Cup sitting out there in the future. Take us inside the room of the process here. What do you do to try to get back in line for one of these really unique, once in a decade kind of events that don't come through here every year?
Well, it is a bid process, and so the bid windows are opened up during different parts of the year. And what Dan and the Sports Council do a great job of, first off, making sure that we're always on top of those and always in the bid, and we try and space them out. Now, in the case of, if you remember, we had the College Football Championship in 2018, the Super Bowl in 2019. We would have had that Final Four in 2020. So we had them kind of back to back to back. One of the only cities in the country that had that opportunity. I think it's important to understand sporting organizations love to come to Atlanta because our logistics package is absolutely unparalleled. I mean, you've got the busiest airport in the world, 20-minute MARTA ride to the middle of downtown, 12,000 hotel rooms within walking distance of the sports venues. And so sporting organizations love to come here. In the case of the Final Four, that bid process will open up soon. The other thing we have to balance is that we do have convention business. We are a big convention city, fourth largest convention city in the country. And so it's one point to get the game, then we've got to get it in a year that it fits. And so that's kind of where the jigsaw puzzle comes in. But I think if Dan were here, he would tell you we'd love to have another Super Bowl. We want to have another All-Star game. We'll certainly be looking at the College Football Championship. I've seen some recent news reports that Major League Baseball has talked about bringing the All-Star game back to Atlanta. I know that that's something we, would love to host. I know they want to be here. And I know the Braves want to have them here. So I believe that will come together again, hopefully very quickly. We have a beautiful ballpark that, we'd love to show off and great opportunity to show off the city as well. So I believe as these bid windows open that we'll be very active. And I think we'll be successful because we've been very successful in the past. Regarding the World Cup, that decision is, I believe now is going to be made by the end of the year. And when you think about our fabulous stadium, when you think about the unbelievable support that soccer has seen in Atlanta, that isn't just a discussion amongst those of us in town. In fact, when I was at this meeting last week, we got to talking about soccer, and several of the cities where soccer is one of their major sports, even they marvel at the attendance numbers that we've been able to draw in the city. And so I think that momentum, the fact that we have a great facility, the fact that Arthur has been such a big proponent of soccer in the city, I think all of those are going to help us as they make their decisions.
If anybody has I have one more question up here, but I'll just give the audience a chance to, if they have one last question for William, go ahead and pop it in. Someone's asking me about the film and video business. Obviously it's been a huge economic boon for Georgia. The tax credits really have helped reshape our economic development strategy in a huge way, whether it's sound stages, whether it's across the state. It's been a great thing for the state and for the city. But is it also a driver of tourism at all, or is it primarily just more of an economic development engine for the workers who come in? Have you seen any bleed over, the Walking Dead tours and things like that? But have you seen anything that's helped grow the tourism business thanks to having film and video here?
Well, we had Atlanta Movie Tours, which was a small business that had done very, very well up until the pandemic. And unfortunately, they're one of the businesses that was a casualty of COVID. But I would expect that someone will pick up that mantle very soon. People love to go to the places where movies and their favorite TV shows are being produced. And so, and that is a big driver. In my neighborhood, Driving Miss Daisy was shot in my neighborhood. People still talk about that, decades later. So I think it is a big driver. And then just as you know, David, because you're in the marketing business, the number of people it takes to make a movie or shoot a TV show or shoot a commercial, they've all got to be housed. And oftentimes they're housed in our hotels in downtown, Midtown, and Buckhead. And so we do get incremental business from that. Now we see so many people in a year that it doesn't drive a huge spike, but it is a really good, steady book of business throughout the year for our hotels.
Right. Well, with that, William, thank you. This has been a great overview, understanding what the dynamics are. You have a really tough job, but you've done an amazing job doing it. By the way, full disclosure, I serve on the Convention Visitors Bureau board, so I get to hear these talks regularly, and I always walk away very optimistic about how our industry is being handled here, and it's such an important piece of what we do, and I'm so glad Rotary got to learn so much more about how things are going. Continued safe travels to you as you travel the world on your mission, and I want to send it back to President Catherine, and thanks again, William.
Thank you so much, and I'm happy to be the last Zoom speaker. I can't wait to see everybody back face to face.
That's right. Exactly. You have an honored position. Thank you both. What a great discussion and such terrific insights, William and David. You come through as always with your fantastic questions. Have one more question of my own. I'm curious, and both of you have such a great historical perspective on this, but thinking about the selection criteria that conventions use, I'm curious what you're seeing as kind of a shift over time and what those selection criteria are. What has emerged as being a more important criteria for selection, and also just sort of looking ahead, what do you see as being increasingly important as these groups are choosing where they're going to visit or have a convention?
Well, logistics is really probably the most important thing for meeting planners, because they want the meeting to go very smoothly. And so, and as I said, if you think about our logistics package, I mean, it's almost unparalleled anywhere else in the country. And we're adding to that. So we're building a Signia Hilton Hotel on the backside of the Georgia World Congress Center. That'll give us 2 convention hotels. when you think about air travel and you think about Delta adding flights back, Atlanta's going to benefit because most of those flights are going to connect to Atlanta in some fashion. So again, it makes it easier to get people in and out. Those of you who do any travel know if you miss a flight trying to get back home to Atlanta, there's another one in a few hours. If you live in other cities, sometimes you're stuck for a day, right? And so that's very important, particularly to travelers. And then we have the one area that we've really closed the gap is in things to do. And so when you look at all of the event venues that we have in the city, all of the great family-friendly attractions and things that have been built over the last 15 years in the city, it really has put together a great package. And then, of course, we're blessed with great weather. So you can come here in November, you can come here in December, and still have a great experience. And so, if you remember the Super Bowl that we had in 19, I mean, it was 75 degrees. Remember that? Everybody was on the street. What a fantastic weekend that was.
Absolutely. No, I remember it well. Great. Well, thank you both so much. Great discussion and lots more to talk about, and we'll continue to monitor the accelerated return.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great.